Recording in progress.
Welcome to the Museums and Cultural Arts Commission meeting. We need a roll call.
All right. Commissioner Peak. Commissioner Castagna.
Here.
Commissioner Sovereign.
Here.
Chair Evans.
Here.
Vice Chair Thomas.
Here.
And Commissioner Witowski.
Present.
Commissioner O'Neill.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, today we are pleased to have Mr. Gary Spalding present us all about what's happening with the History and Art Association. And specifically, I guess you're going to talk about the museum. So you're on.
For those of you who may not know me, my name is Gary Spradlin. I am the current president of Monterey History and Art Association, and I was asked to come and talk to you a bit about what's going on at Stanton Center. So I did not know, and probably still don't know, the background of most of you. So I put in a page about our background at the museum, actually about the association. So we were formed in 1931. You may know that. Had a dinner at Cadamatori's, and most people think of Cadamatori as being where Casa Serrano is today. When that dinner was held, it was at the top end of Lake Calistero, and what became my photography and our shop, sort of by the car wash. So anyway, that was the original location of that restaurant.
Gary, would you mind speaking up just one notch higher?
Sure.
Mic's on.
Does that help?
Yeah.
I can put it in my mouth, actually. Anyway, the founding members included some pretty interesting people. Laura Bride Powers was the curator at the Custom House. Roger Fitch, who was just about to retire as the commandant at the Presidio. Carlton Fortune, who was an artist, as you know. Armin Hansen, also an artist. SFB Morse, businessman, I'm sure you all heard of. Governor Morse, who was a writer, owner of La Mirada, also, I think, a director or film producer down in Hollywood. Myron Oliver, also a businessman, whose home was just down the street here on Dutra, I believe. And then Lee Vida and Margaret Jacks, the daughters of David Jacks, and a number of other notables. The purpose of the association was originally to save the adobes, more or less, and to preserve art. So the technical reading of it was the purpose, as stated in the articles, was to collect, preserve, and own paintings, sketches, drawings, records, books, manuscripts, charts, and other materials pertaining to the history and art of Monterey and California, and to assist and further all such projects and activities, and to have and to hold, to buy and to sell property, both real and personal, as may be necessary to carry out the objects of the creation of this organization, and to do and to perform every act and thing necessary to carry out these purposes. So the early accomplishments of the organization included preserving French consulate, which was moved over to Lake Calistero. It's still there. We created the Path of History, which has an interesting story, as I understand, was kind of a collaboration between Laura Bride Powers and Colonel Fitch. Colonel Fitch with a paint can, and Laura Bride Powers knew where everything was, and he more or less followed her around and painted a stripe in the street. That's probably a condensed version of what really happened, but I think that's kind of an interesting story. We began the Mariendas in 1931. We have owned at one point in time the Fremont Adobe. We still own Casa Serrano. We did own the Perry Downer House, still own the Dowd House, still own the library, which was the first Protestant church in Monterey. And along the way, we were gifted the Allen Knight Maritime Collection that became the nucleus for the Maritime Museum. And that was opened about 1992, the original museum being underneath what the current art museum is. And I think that was 1957 or thereabouts. So that's background. What we're doing today. These are sort of highlights as I recall them from the last 18 months or so. It was just about 18 months ago that we acquired through a gift the Joe Mora collection. We bought the Family Trust. That was a donation given to us by Susan and Dennis Marr. I don't know if you know them. We have terminated our agreements that created the magic shows at Stanton Center. That was the deli at 17 Mile Drive. We're not very successful in drawing a crowd, so they gave up after a while, and we terminated the relationship. Once that occurred, a number of things happened, and people began to take interest because our stated goal was to try to resurrect our museum in the way we thought it would best serve the public. Not become a maritime museum again, but become a local museum featuring local history, local art. And that's the direction we feel we are headed in. The Chapman family, who have a Whitman globe, used to be in the Maritime Museum. You can change slides, I think. Maybe not. Okay, never mind. There was a globe that used to be in the Stanton Center. It was a handmade globe, basically. That's been over in Terry Trotter's gallery for many years, but it has come back in the last few months to us. It's on display on the second floor, along with a number of lithographs, watercolors, and etchings that the Chapman family gave us. They are products of Paul Whitman, who was a student of Armand Hanson's. They both used that big press that's there in the room. Whitman made an etching of that press that's on the wall. And when I showed that to Peter Hiller, who happened to be there, he said, well, that's actually Joe Mora's gallery. I mean, his studios. The etching did sit, or not the etching, the actual press may have been used by Joe Mora as well. My understanding is it goes back a lot further than that, to Philadelphia, where it was once used to print money. We have begun in earnest to refurbish the second floor galleries, and I'll show you a picture or two of that in a moment. They have been pretty much redone. We have a few spots where we have some of the Dolly art still on the wall, maybe 10 or 12 of Dolly lithographs. We have refurbished the auditorium. We were left when the magic show left without sound system, without control of the lighting, and it was pretty dirty in there. So it's cleaned. We've purchased, with the help of a grant, a new sound system, a new lighting system. It's almost complete. We're waiting for the projector to arrive. We'll have a fully equipped auditorium. Also, very recently, I think it was just a week or so ago, we asked Dmitry Peterman, who owned the Dolly art. He had given us half of his collection a few years ago, and he's been promising over and over again to give us a second half. Not that we were completely interested in having it, but he was going to offer it. But we got tired of waiting, and we asked him to come pick it up, either give it to us or take it home. And so he came and picked it up. And so we have quite a bit of empty space now on the first floor that we're going to try to backfill with things we have. That's brings me to my last bullet. To try to fill that, we've been in talks with a number of other nonprofits to see if they would like to use part of the space there. I'll tell you more about that in a few minutes. So the next slide shows you the layout, pretty much as it is today. On the first floor, you can see there are a number of blank areas. Those are actually, two of the rooms are filled with Dolly art. The one closest to the stairs is actually empty. The area where it says Stanton architecture is going to be a display that Kent CV is putting together for us. Will feature the Stantons, and it'll go along that wall. We've been in discussions with the Italian Heritage Society to provide displays for some of the area on the first floor. We've also had in the Western Flyer Foundation, and we're thinking about having a sort of a collaboration of all three of us using that first floor area. On the second floor, you can see where we have Mora in several of the gallery areas, Armand Hanson and Paul Whitman on towards where the globe is. And we have a featured artist which has been a rotating, every 3 months. We have a new artist on the second floor. And as of, last Monday, we filled in the area where it says Conan. There are 25 watercolors that were painted, by a local artist. She was local at the time. She lived in a number of places. She lived in Carmel in the early 60s. And she painted the path of history, or what she called the path of history. And she went around painting watercolors of adobes and other historic buildings. And when she couldn't find access to one of the buildings, she'd go to the library and find a postcard or something like that that had a picture of that building and would paint it. So she'd sketch it and then take it home and paint it. So we were told about the existence of these things about 2 years ago. They were over in our Grand Junction, Colorado. The artist, who was Zella Conan, had died, I believe in '87, and had given these paintings to her good friend and painting companion. And this woman is quite elderly now, and she was trying to find somewhere to put them. And her daughter or daughter-in-law had contacted us through our internet site and said, if we were interested, we could probably purchase them. So my wife and I drove over there and took a look and bought them and brought them back. So they're now part of our collection. And they went up on the wall last Monday. We've created the archive also for Joe Mora's collection that was stored in a paid storage facility over by just the other side of the Naval Postgraduate School. That's now in Stanton Center on the second floor. So that's sort of Peter Hiller's workspace now. There's a large room there it's just full of Joe Mora. There's a conference room up there that used to be a conference room. It was enclosed with all the windows, by the way, everywhere windows were enclosed by Dimitri Peterman as he put up his dolly display. So we're going to open up some of these windows. And one of the first places I want to open up is the old conference room. So we can use that as either office or as a boardroom or whatever turns out to be right, but it's just a dark room at the moment. We're going to do the same thing on the stairwell. There are windows there were closed off, and we'll open those up again. So on the next page, you can see photographs of the large press up in the left corner. And that's the Whitman Globe over in the corner. And the Whitman art is on the wall to the left of the globe, and Hanson art, which is part of, is on the wall to the right, and wraps around to a freestanding wall that's between the gallery area and the elevator, basically. And on the lower right corner, you can see our Joe Mora exhibits. There are, I think, 5 or 6 walls now with Joe Mora. The ones that are featured there in the center are called Animal Dumb. That is a collection of newspaper prints that he made in 1907 and 1908. He was employed by the Boston Herald, I believe it was, to create a weekly cartoon for them. And these are those cartoons. So they're hung on display now. They're all just about animals. The room to the right that you can't see much about is about costumes and dance. And these are some of Joe's works that are featuring early California dancers and costuming. The ones we just hung this week, the Zella Conan gallery is the next page. You can see a picture of Zella there. I think she's probably on Carmel Beach. You can't really tell it from here, but it looks like there's a body of water behind her, and she has a camera. There's a 1938 newspaper version of the Path of History there on the wall, and a brief bio of Zella. And you can see I can't do justice to what's on the wall, but you can see there are a lot of paintings. There are 25 in total, and they wrap all down what used to be the bridge that goes over the reception desk area and wraps around the room where the old maritime display was, and then comes back out the other side. And you sort of follow the path of history, and it starts with the custom house, and we just follow the path of history kind of backwards around. And then there are two outlying areas that she painted. One is the Mesa area, and then she painted some buildings down around Carmel. So they were featured in there as well. So as far as our plans and possibilities, what we're doing, I mentioned that we have an exhibit on architecture that Kent Seavey is working up. I believe this will all be photographs and things that we have either have in the museum already in the back storage area, or we have a large, and I really mean large, is that the scrapbook from Mrs. Stanton that Kent is going through, and he's extracting things from that, and I believe he's blowing them up so that we can put them on the wall as an exhibit. I mentioned that we're doing something with the Italian Heritage Society. They were very active. They actually have a proposed banner that they would like to hang inside that they're working up a cost in a design with Monterey signs. And they've shown me a sample of that. So we're going to have an exhibit by them. I'm not quite sure. They had incorporated the Western Flyer in their exhibit. And I believe the Western Flyer might want to be somewhat larger and more separate and use the museum for other reasons. For instance, a classroom. They'd like to use a classroom. So we may try to find a place to do that. So they're bigger, and I'm not quite sure how these will all play together, but we'll figure it out. We'd also like to have something for the indigenous peoples. I'm not quite sure, but we have a few spaces upstairs where this will work out nicely around the Jomora art. We have other possibilities that have been suggested, perhaps something from the fire department that we'd maybe like to display in Stanton. We have some audiovisual things we'd like to show, and we have a video that we like to play as sort of a continuously running thing in the auditorium that visitors could come in and take a look at. So, and that's pretty much what I had intended to tell you. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to field them.
Trying to remember where the Dowd House is. That the White House sort of between the Mayo Hayes and the Perry House?
Yes, exactly. It's a long, thin building, and if you're not familiar with it, when you're on the street, you're looking at the back of the building. It actually has a large front porch, and they used to face the harbor and had probably the best view on the peninsula.
What is the current use of that?
One end of it is used as a sort of a deep archive for the library. The rest of it is we're storing things in it at the moment. We have parts of the costume collection in there. We have a number of books that were donated that we're trying to sell individually that came from the Cooper family. We intend to, there's a number of things that need to be done to that building. It needs to be fumigated, roofed, and painted. So there's some work that has to be done. We're going to work on a grant to try to get that done. And once we have it done, we'd like to use that as sort of an annex for the museum and use it for displays and exhibits.
On the first floor diagram, as you approach the main entrance on the right, there's like a little meeting room where some of the old fishermen used to meet every Saturday. And I don't see it shown on the diagram. Is that not part of this?
That's not part of Stanton Center. Our lease agreement with the city says that will remain separate from us. It's something we will talk about with the city. We would like to, since they're not using it, we'd like to use it as a coffee shop and a snack shop for the museum. Almost every museum you go to has some form of snack shop or coffee shop. We do not. So we'd like to use it that way. There's a doorway between the lobby and that room. So it would be very convenient to do that. It'd be possible to put cafe tables or something outside. There's a covered roof. So there's potential there. But, we've talked about this a bit with Hans, but it's still just talk at this point.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
The one thing I would say, Gary, oh, just a quick comment on John's comment. I know there's a liability and an opportunity. The liability is that Port Monterey History and Art has to take care of the public restrooms for the entire area for Custom House Plaza. So whether there's an ice skating rink or car show or whatever, they use the public restrooms, and that's a inordinate cost. I don't know where you're at all with City Hall on that. And then second, the community room initially was that for the Sicilian fishermen to have breakfast. But as you can tell, they're mainly at East Village now. They don't want to be isolated. They want to be out in the community. And so I know in the past, the city has talked about maybe that being a coffee shop or a restaurant or whatever, and that would help the revenue side. But my main question is, you know, we have the Museum of Art directly across the street, and I would hope that you would lean a little bit more in the future toward the historic aspects, as you've shown, the Western Flyer, not only the Italian heritage, but there's the Japanese heritage, the Portuguese, the Chinese with those, and also just the history. You might be the appetizer for people to come to your place since it's so centrally located, and then eventually go to the Colton Hall Museum to find out about the beginning of Monterey, and also the Pacific House, which my understanding goes from the indigenous people all the way up to Sloat's Landing. And so you could be a bridge to those two other museums with historic exhibits.
I didn't say it actually, but the proposal we have from the Italian Heritage Society it's of course Italian centric, but it includes Japanese, Chinese,
Oh,
indigenous peoples, and it includes the Western Flyer. They laid out 2 rooms on the first floor with basically objects. There's very little art will be on the first floor, and I'm pretty sure that'll be the end case as well. However, it works out with Western Flyer, I think the whole first floor will be probably fishing heritage and local fishermen, that sort of thing. Will not be an art museum in that sense. It'll be more like a maritime museum in a sense, but it'll be fisheries rather than just history of sailing or that sort of thing.
the one final question for me, at least, is have you come up with the name? I mean, naming that has always been very interesting. It used to be, I believe, the Maritime Museum at the Stanton Center. Then it was the Dolly Museum at the Stanton Center. And has Monterey History and Art come up with a name for that museum?
We decided to pass on the Dolly Maritime Museum, but we're going to be the History and Art at Stanton Center. So it's basically a marriage of our association's name and Stanton Center. So Monterey History and Art at Stanton Center. And we have had signage made, and I'm debating now with the planning department about how to get that up, because I didn't understand that I couldn't just replace the signage that was there. And I made things that were too big, and I don't know how they got away with making too big signs, but I can't do the same. So I may have to cut some signs in half, do things like that to meet the current requirements. But you'll see that name go up whenever I can get the banners up.
Okay.
Wanna
Yeah.
ask, the Marienda sold out yet, or?
You know, that's a question I can't answer. I see the tickets going off on our website, and I don't know what the total is. It does always sell out, but we've had a problem we've tried to solve rather in the last year or so. It used to be you could go in, a member could buy a table, and then they would invite their friends. And so we'd end up with 20 members and 400 guests. And members couldn't get a ticket other than the ones that bought the tables. So we decided to change that. And last year and this year, you could not buy a table. You have to buy, at least you couldn't buy it until the second month of the sale. The first month is for members. And so they can get a ticket if they want to get a ticket. And then the next month, they can buy one for their friends, or the general public can buy a ticket. but we're trying to make sure that at least the membership has a chance to buy a ticket. So that's what we've done. But I don't know if it's sold out, but it will.
Anybody else?
Thanks. so much.
Okay, Gary, thank you very much. It was very enlightening.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, that brings us to the approval of the February 2nd meeting minutes. Any questions or comments on the minutes? I'll entertain a motion to approve. John, you want to move?
Yeah, I'll move
And then-
to Tim's second.
Right, okay. Uh, All in favor?
Aye.
I abstained because I was absent.
Yes, I also am abstaining because I was absent. Okay, and that brings us to public comments. And there's nobody in the room. Is there anybody online?
Chair Evans, there is nobody online. I do just want to share how members can participate and the chance anyone is viewing on Comcast Channel 25 or YouTube. You may dial toll-free 833-568-8864, enter meeting ID 161-622-2299, followed by the pound sign. We do encourage those who would like to make a public comment to join us live on Zoom, as there is an approximate 10-second delay on YouTube and a 90-second delay on Comcast Channel 25. So at this time, there are no public comments.
Okay, that brings us to informational reports and staff comments. So Brian, I guess you're it today.
That's me today. So thanks, Chair. To start off with giving an update on the Kalisa statue. So you may remember that back early 2022, it suffered damage to the wine glass that Kalisa was holding, and that was removed. The wine glass has been bent. So we found that we had a local sculptor, I believe it's Eric Johnson. He had worked on repairing the Dennis the Menace statue. So I got a quote from him to actually repair the Kalisa statue. So it's a reasonable quote, and we're looking at doing that in the next month or two to get that statue repaired. So basically we'd be welding that back in place and doing it there on site because of how I believe the bust is probably epoxied there on the granite pedestal. So removing it would possibly cause damage to that. So I would prefer to just have that done on site. So happy to get that done. The Bruce Harris murals that were there on Cannery Row, we had those taken down during the storms. I came out to Cannery Row to check on one of the worker houses that's there on Bruce Harris Way, which was broken into. And I had to go in there to get the building maintenance to get it repaired, and noticed that one of the posts holding up those 4x8, there's two 4x8 panels. I believe when Bruce Harris was getting the work done at the Intercontinental, when they were doing the murals down there on Cannery Row, that's when those were first done. And I noticed one of the posts was loose and it was shaking. We had those really heavy winds and it was looking like a sail. It was just the beam on the bottom had broken off, and I called building maintenance. I said, we need these taken down right away because it was a hazard in my mind. So that's why if you go down Cannery Row right now, you'll notice that those murals been taken down. I did reach out to a local doctor and his wife regarding the original. Thank you, Commissioner Thomas, for connecting me with that. That painting was based on an original that was by Bruce Harris. It is still here in Monterey. So I went and I took some photographs of it to figure out, can we get that blown up and put on an interpretive panel and put that instead there, that it's going to be on a more solid base and in there. So right now I'm researching the process for that because that's city property there. And what do we need to do to get a replacement sign installed? So we will have something with, from the collection of, if this is how we go forward, it'll be from the collection of, the current owners of that painting. So we're working on that currently, but that was my intent, is not to hang back up those 4x8 panels, because we've mentioned this before at earlier meetings, is that the painting is deteriorating, holding off there. The paint is actually coming off of the wood, because it's just 4x8 plywood. We have a lot of those paintings from when the Intercontinental was being built. We still have those in storage, and there's a variety of condition for those as well. Commissioners Castagna and Sovereign joined myself and Jordan Leininger for a collection assessment for preservation for Colton Hall, the old jail, and Alvarado Street Vault. We're waiting on a draft report pending, but we were really looking at the facilities there. One side of it was collections, one side of it was facilities. So it was looking, is this the proper storage here in the vault? Are there any kind of better opportunities for storage in there? How are we presenting our documents that we have on there? Because one of my main concerns with Colton Hall is, and the exhibits there, is the exhibits don't rotate. And the exhibits have been there for 10, 15, 20, 30 years. And some of those items in there, generally like paper documents, you want out for 3 months max at a time, then store them for a year. When we have them out, the signing documents, they are covered when they're not there. But if we were open more days a week, you would have those signing documents, the original signing documents, and UV light really damages ink over time. So finding out a way to either doing replicas, or you'll see some of the schoolhouse photos in there where the lights have been shining on it, the photos have just deteriorated, that they're not visible really anymore. So that was part of it, was having a photo conservator as one person, and another person who was a founding principal of Architectural Resources Group. So he's quite familiar with buildings in Monterey. He's worked here, different areas in the peninsula. So we talked about pointing of Colton Hall, and I do believe we still have, I think, $158,000 from a previous NCIP project for repointing. And the main thing with that to understand is that generally the mortar should not be stronger than the bricks, because you want the mortar to fail before the stone fails. And because they use the cement, that's why you would want to replace do the repointing on a building like Colton Hall, because the mortar, the cement, is harder than the stone. Where an old jail has that Point Lobos granite stone, which is really solid rock, that there's no real concern with the old jail of the stone there. But looking forward to that, to see what the best practices are. A couple of highlights that we did discuss are things like there's no fire suppression in that Colton Hall, and having candles in there for different programs could be a liability and an issue, and to use LED lights, or to install lighting in there, because the ceiling in there is not historic. The ceiling in there is drywall. So that's not something that we would have to be concerned about damaging, or there is some original joists in there because the roof has been redone in Colton Hall. But having candle lit programs and everything in there, because if it did catch on fire with no fire suppression, that building could just be lost. For the upcoming fiscal year budget, I'm asking for a regular part-time cultural arts assistant. That would be somebody to work on special programs, assist with our music programs here, art programs here with the Museums and Cultural Arts Commission. So, and then also you'll see I've asked for replacement of the halogen light fixtures in Colton Hall. So that's another thing I've asked for the building, which is going back to the lighting in this places where halogen is an older light style and it's damaging to photographs, where an LED is a lot better for any kind of historic items that we have in there. For example, we have all Walter Colton items in there, and by having those items in there consistently being hit with halogen lighting can really damage the books, can damage any kind of items that are in there over time. So we will see if either of those things go forward. I'm looking forward to ongoing budget discussions with the city manager's office and finance and HR. So we have the consultants for the Path of History or Page and Turnbull, we're currently working with them on next steps for the project. We met recently with them to discuss the social justice and equity template, as well as kind of what are some ideas for two paths. I did send them quite a bit of document that the commission here has done, that Dennis Copeland had worked on. I know different paths that Commissioner Thomas has worked on and with the Japanese community. So, and then shared some maps from different areas in Cannery Row and other things that are of importance. I've shared a bunch of different documents with them. I did contact, because this was based on a grant with Community Foundation Monterey County. I did contact Community Foundation Monterey County asking for an extension because we started the grant process late since I started in here with the library and museum. So they approved that. They approved to give a final report later than what we had. But we are looking at Page and Turnbull is working with Albion. Albion is a partner connecting with the Native American community, the indigenous community here in the different areas, the Esalen, the Remsen, different communities here. And so they've reached out to them to talk with them directly. But I believe that the timeline, we will have an additional meeting probably the first week of May, and then the second week of June, and I'll send these out to the commissioners as well. And we're looking at on the timeline that they've shared with me is having public meetings for a new walking tour, number 1, and number 2 on the week of, let me just say that first week of June. So I'll work on that, make sure I'm not out.
Would that be the first time they actually come here? And
I believe they might even be working via Zoom on that. We'll have to,
sorry.
they may be working on Zoom. We'll talk
Oh.
with them about that as well. I know that Christina Dekas, I believe one of the principals, she came out prior to all meeting with us. She came out to just kind of walk around the area, but not officially, and didn't meet with us directly on that.
And if at all possible, it'd be great if the subcommittee could walk with the consultant through the neighborhood after they go down the pathway a little bit.
Right. We can always mention that with them too. But yeah, that we'll be updating on kind of the timeline report. I don't have any reports from them yet or any documents from them on to anything to present to the full commission here yet. I want to update folks on the Explore Monterey, the cell phone tours that are operated by OnCell. It's now being done by Story, STQRY. I've provided the link in the agenda report, but one thing we're going to be going forward with is creating a Monterey Path of History app. And what this would be an Apple and Android app. And we would have the option, you can, right now, if you can go on the website, if you're on your cell phone, you can actually use this, and it works better on your cell phone than on your website, because you could kind of see where you are in terms of like a maps on your GPS on your phone. But there are a number of different options we would be able to do on this too, which is one is to create like a public art walk, or to create separate walks on here. So I'd be able to kind of come in here and say, this is a public art walk, and take photos. And I know that in the past, pre-pandemic, the Museum and Cultural Arts Commission had worked possibly with Claire or Chalet to identify some things, for, I think that was an NCIP project at one point for public art master plan. So if people remember that, was prior to my time, but been looking through different documents to look at what that would be. But I think having a public art highlight as well on there, as well as the Path of History, and if these 2 additional walks would be there, we could highlight those separately as well. And I could put that content, because that would be a lot faster than trying to figure out the signage in the ground, the signage at the buildings, or getting a lot of that, because I think all of those are going to take quite a bit of more time to really get out there. But we would be able to create content, hopefully in this upcoming year, to really have a Path of History where people would look up Monterey on an app and be able to download more information about us. So with that, there was just a couple photos on some of the damage to the Bruce Harris mural, and the Kalisa missing that, and the sign for the OnCell phone tour signage, which is, it would still operate as a phone tour if people want to do the phone tour for the current sites. But my next steps are also reaching out to state parks, because one of the things is that a number of sites are owned, managed by state parks. And so they're not on our map. But really, my goal is to have all of those items on this single app, because I think if you're coming to Monterey, or if you live here, you don't really care if it's owned by state parks or the city or whoever it is. You just want to know the information, and having it out there, it just makes it more open to everybody. So that would be my hope kind of moving forward on that.
And the
So-
original path of history, that's how it was.
It-
It didn't matter, only in fact, they, on the original map, they
Mhm.
had Queens and Windsor and Marion. How this was where, so it's.
Right. And I think it's just different for the Explore Monterey app and the on sale tour. And that's where if you find, like, you can still see those folding guides that are out there in the community, and we still produce and send those out. And when I first moved here, I called the wrong number because there's two phone numbers. There's one number for state parks. There's one number for the city. I called the state park line and called them and dialed in a different number, and I got Point Lobos. And that's where I think having this, where for me, for online, if we were to just put it in the app, it makes a lot more sense for us to just have all of that information there together. So that's what I'd like to work with. I'm trying to reach out to them right now and all that.
So do you see this as a single map that does all these things, or are they going to have a selection of maps? Like, as you say, art, Adobe's, the names of some of these other walks that we're talking about.
It's a selection. It's a selection. And then the other item I'm looking at, I'm going to be doing more research on, is whether we could do more based on some of our specific museums. Because one thing I would like to see is that if you go into our museums, is there an accessibility standpoint of more languages available for, if you wanted to go into Colton Hall and you wanted more information on the sign-in sheet and you wanted that in Chinese, or if you wanted that in whatever other language would need, and you'd be able to get more information directly on there. Or the Presidio Monterey Museum, different sites for the
Right.
Pacific Biological Lab. So basically be walking tours and then possibly museum
Museum.
information.
Super.
So we'll be working on that too. And because we're already working with On Sale and Story, we're working forward with the app is going to be a lot easier to get us going. We should have that by this coming fiscal year.
Sounds good.
I applaud what you're doing, because for years, these things have been separate and you couldn't get them integrated. The city and the parks and some other, I think, History and Art tried to do common signage, so someone coming into the city could go wherever they wanted to go, but none of those programs in the past have been success. So if you could do something, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
What's that?
Those signs were up on the whole, so originally, in 1932, you could do that.
Yeah,
The driving tour, that's how it was done.
but since the 90s, you could not do that.
Yeah, well, my hope, one of the features, depending on how we do it, with technology, they have there's like a geolocation. So if you want to do an app, open it on your app, you can have it. If you wanted to do it as an audio tour, for example, you could have it autoplay. So if you're walking down a way and actually have it autoplay, if you're within, it's called geofencing within, if you're in within 25 feet of this marker or 50 feet of this marker, it could autoplay the information that you wanted to play.
Yeah, that can work inside the museums too.
Yeah, so we just really have to make sure we have to spend some time and resources to make sure that we do it right. But I think for me, it's a great way to kind of highlight what we have.
What I would recommend, Brian, on the part-time person is that you get together with Bob, and maybe Bob draft a letter from the commission saying, here are all the many things that we're able to accomplish now with your help, and Jordan, here are the additional things that we can do if we get this half-time person, and spell it out very specifically, and hit again that this division is the lowest step, a division maybe in the history of Monterey with this one part-time person. So I don't think I need to see the letter, but I do think it would be good to have a letter from the commission that goes to the city council.
And I think we have time because we're working on all the discussions. So I think at the next meeting, I can provide an update on where all the budget is. And
Has the city manager been receptive to your request so far? Or
they've been listening. They've been listening because I have my commission, I have
that's
my,
not the same as receptive though. Huh?
well, I mean, until the ink,
Yeah.
until the ink gets there, my feeling is that, just continue having the discussions and promoting why it's needed. So I'm having these discussions with the library and museums together, and this is what we need for these departments. So looking forward to it. And I think I can always, connect with the chair and figure out where we're at in the coming weeks prior to the next meeting.
Okay,
With that, any other questions? Otherwise, I can present for Jordan. He's out today.
no,
No, all right. So I will say we've had a number of class visits coming in again for Colton Hall. It's great to see the classes coming in. So you'll see there 4 different groups and over in Colton Hall and the old jail, and a number of classes coming in as well for Presidio. Actually, I thought we had one at Presidio, but yeah. So there was February and March for Colton Hall. There were just a number of different classes to see in there, and the Defense Language Institute tour. We've had a couple of different tours of them over time. Presidio of Monterey Museum. Still kind of low turnout right there. Our Pacific Biological Labs, we do have open hours as a reminder for folks coming up this weekend too. And we have our 12 to 4 p.m. is our open hours there after we do our 2 morning tours on there. So that site is getting still kind of low. We've had a couple different private tours there for Pacific Biological Lab, and we're also going to be doing a reading coming up for the Western Flyer with Susan Schillinglaw over there. The cell phone tours, that's in March cell phone tours, you'll see those were low. That's actually the on sale currently, where it's really done on the cell level, like the phone calling into sites. So that's where I'd hope that if we got an app that it would be much higher. But you'll see the drop off down to 2023 of 49 people calling into the cell phone in February and 4 in March. So really those cell phone tours are not getting a lot of traffic. A couple of different highlights, as we mentioned before, Jordan I had him drop off the wine glass up with Eric Johnson to see about getting that repaired, and we've approved the quote on that. So we had our Zoom meetings. Let's kind of briefly go over some of these things here.
is Jordan planning sort of a grand opening when the Buffalo Soldiers exhibit is ready to roll?
Well, he is. So I'll say we don't have a date for that yet. It's on further down in here because we talked about having it as that's kind of later on, where he was talking about having that as the lost extraordinary valor, the lost history of the Buffalo Soldiers of Monterey, with 2 sub exhibits, Buffalo Soldiers exhibit and 1902 exhibit. So we're looking at getting a couple of photos kind of prepared. There was a single photo that was a panoramic, and that was, I believe, the 15th Infantry that was right behind that. We ended up getting the 2 new mannequins installed there over at the in there, so you can actually see the mannequin. And we're in the middle of ordering some new pins and everything. We're getting all the right insignia installed for that, but we do have the mannequins in the space right now. And he's gotten a couple of different photos from different museums, and we're going to be getting those in there. So once we get all of that set up, he's looking at probably this in the coming months to have some kind of exhibit, some kind of ceremony for that. We did have, as you've probably seen up on the Presidio, we've had a couple trees out. Luckily, we've gotten all those taken care of with recreation. We had a second one just down at that lighthouse curve just the other day. And just happy to get that there was no heavy damage on any of that area right there on the Presidio. So, yeah, anything else in here? I'm trying to think of a, yeah, besides that exhibit. So, yeah, let's see. So I'm trying, sorry. Yeah, so the last page is more about kind of the Buffalo Soldiers in 1902 exhibit layouts. As I mentioned, we had two different photos. So the one that was a panoramic, that was a larger kind of onto two panels, we're just getting that shrunk down. And then the other one will be the other camp. I believe that was over when the Buffalo Soldiers were stationed out in PG. So those would just be the two photos kind of behind there. Then we have some different photos in the glass case out there, but, and yeah, and so I just purchased another set of insignias yesterday for the 15th Infantry because the infantry outfit in there actually had the wrong insignias on it. So we were able to kind of locate different ones and get those. We'll be setting those up in the coming days as they come out. But yeah, if you want to see the soldiers and the new. Right now, you're welcome on Saturdays and Sundays when we have them up there. Or if you want to see another day, let myself or Jordan know, and we'll walk you around to see that. But any questions about Jordan's report?
I was curious about Michael Hemp. Is he, I assume that most of his collection deals with Cannery Row. And is he offering that not only to the city, but the Cannery Row Company, the aquarium and other people? And do you have any idea how much money?
I don't. I actually met Michael Hemp a couple of months ago when the Western Flyer was doing an event. Western Flyer Foundation was doing an event, and I met Michael Hemp there, and he said, "Oh, I have this large collection. I'd love for you to come up to Washington and check it out." And he didn't give me any number, but it did sound like he was trying to sell it. But he asked if I would come up to Washington and take a look at it and see it. So I wasn't aware he was in town until Jordan had texted me at that day and said, "Hey, I've got a question for you. I'm here with Michael Hemp." I said, "Oh, wait." So I don't know if he didn't give us any kind of numbers or anything. And I don't know if he reached out to anybody else yet. But he was there, over at Stanford. When the Western Flyer was out and doing a presentation, he came out that day. So he might have been talking to other people, but I just don't know.
He was here for the Navy band or singers program because
The sea shanties,
yeah, he was there. I bumped into him and talked for a couple of minutes, but not about exhibits or anything.
A lot of his exhibits are from Pat Hathaway, aren't they? A lot of
Yeah.
his photos and all that.
Yeah,
The ones in the
Michael collected a lot of stuff over the years that he got.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I know that when we looked at I think one of the things that we will need to look at is what's in our vaults in the future and how much space, or if there's any other kind of different types of shelving for storing more, because we're pretty much at the brim as it is in those sites.
we need more exhibit space.
Well, in it rotating it, I think that most places and exhibit, 5 to 10% of their actual collection at a time. A lot of it's really just in storage and rotating in and out.
So we need more horsepower to rotate.
Rotate. Well, and figure out what exactly do we want to show, and what's the right place to show it.
Okay. So you have concluded?
I've concluded, unless there's any other questions regarding any museum activities.
Okay, then I guess that brings us to commissioner comments. John, you want to start?
I have nothing today. Thank you.
Mike or Bill?
I like to pass out this plein air. I hope everybody marks down April 15th. It's gonna be like the great art day. The Museum of Art is closing off Kelly Principal for the whole block from Larkin to Stokes Adobe. So they're gonna have a big event both in the afternoon and in the evening. Gary with Monterey History and Art is doing a Joe Mora Day where Joe Mora's art is going to be featured at not only at the Stanton Center, but at Casa Serrano, not the Dowd House, I don't think, but the Mayo O'Donnell Library. And our group, the Old Monterey Foundation, is putting together these plein air artists. On the back of it, we have actually 16 artists, and they're going to be scattered on Kelly P and Pacific Street and all around Casa Serrano. So it's going to be a nice art day. And as part of my distribution of these postcards, I went to the Chamber of Commerce, which serves as the de facto visitor center. If you haven't, that's on Lake Alastero.
Yeah.
If you haven't been in there, pop in there. They have actually most of the racks that the visitor center had. And lo and behold, the visitor center that was going to make the building, the French consulate, which was going to make so much money for the city of Monterey, is still vacant a year and a half later.
Yeah,
But I do want you to know that instead of that one, I think it's at, I want to say Webster and Munros, where nobody knows and there's no
Yeah,
sign. The
Right.
Chamber of Commerce actually does do a nice visitor center within their building. And they say people just, even the signing, I guess, says chamber. So people park there, the restrooms are there, they let the kids run around the lake. And then they go into the chamber and they have a lot of information. So they're doing a very nice job filling in for the city.
okay. Tim,
Other than Monterey JCL had a very successful teacher training program for our new documentary film Enduring Democracy. The teachers, librarians, and museum people from all over Monterey Peninsula were there and spent the day. Oh, it was very successful. We were very happy.
great. Michael,
There is a rumor that Leonard is going to give a talk at some public gatherings about the Buffalo Soldiers, and maybe we could get him to give it at one of our meetings coming up.
but you're saying Jordan?
Jordan.
Okay. Sounds like a good idea. And he's been interviewed a number of times recently.
You can practice on us.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. John?
Other than that, I have no comments.
Kimberly?
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
And I want to thank Brian for continuing to think about new ways to present Monterey, because I think the app route is a terrific one. We just have to figure out how to promote the app so people will download it. But because you go to a museum almost anywhere these days, and they have an app, and they'll remind you when you come in there that we have an app, download it. And it's great to do that, because you can do the walking tour, and you know, if you have earbuds or however you connect to your phone, it's simpler than renting or taking out a set of headphones and something you have to put in your pocket and all that sort of thing. So good way to go. And with that, I think we can conclude. Our next meeting is
May 4th.
May 4. In person.
No
Thanks,
problem.
everyone.